district requested for this session to be recorded so that it may be shared to other educators who may have wanted to join us today but have to be elsewhere. So again, my name is Faye Colley, and I am delighted to speak to Dr. Hartwell multiple times a day. I really do enjoy working with her and Dr. Howard. My buckets in this office include professional learning as well as communications. And just like Dr. Hartwell and Dr. Howard, we directly support adept administrators for multiple districts. Thanks for joining us.
So thank you, ladies. Thank both of you for being with me here in this training. I actually do similar work as my colleagues. I have a group of districts that are assigned to me, one of which happens to be your district, Dorchester 2. So I work with Dr. Wilson very closely. So I am super delighted to be working with folks that are actually in a district that I work with. So welcome, everybody. We're here this morning to share with you some feedback on growing equitable teachers and leaders to create safe, inclusive, and rigorous classrooms. We certainly hope that you enjoy your time with us today because we really look forward to this training for a long time. On the next slide, you'll see the outcomes we want you to walk away with today. We first want you to be able to envision and clarify what a safe, inclusive, and rigorous learning environment should look like in your school and there in Dorchester too. We also are going to spend some time and want you to walk away with what you believe to be specific supports or common language you can share or for teachers or leaders in your school and districts around this idea of creating or furthering or continuing to develop safe, inclusive, and rigorous learning environments. So we're going to start by talking about a change that will impact all classroom-based teachers, which is the fact that we have revised the rubric based on recommendations from NIET. They're the team that actually developed the rubric. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Then we're going to move into what the research says about these safe, inclusive learning environments, what that looks like, what are the big buckets of things we should focus on. And then we're going to take a deeper look into what you believe your needs are in this area. And then, of course, end with a wrap up and reflection about all that we've shared. On this next slide, the South Carolina Department of Education's vision, and we do want to share that with you at the start because vision is important, right? Our vision is that all students are prepared for success in college, in career, and of course in citizenship. We know that disproportionalities in our academic outcomes, discipline data, and college and career readiness show us that there's important work to be done to reach this vision. Our experience working with principals and teachers from across the state and interacting with our colleagues outside of the state show us that two things make a difference in schools, schools that are going the right direction, even in these tough circumstances. So, first, schools that are going in the right direction in terms of building safe, inclusive, and rigorous learning environments have a really clear and clearly communicated instructional vision, right? Vision is important. Being able to share that vision in a way that the people you're working with can absorb it is important. A really clear and clearly communicated instructional vision. And finally, establishing an environment for students that is safe, inclusive, and focused on learning. So, how can we unpack this? We we began by looking at the rubric, and that's part of what we're here to talk with you about today. The rubric. When we thought about the rubric and where instruction impacts safe and inclusive, rigorous learning spaces, the environment domain was a natural place to start. So that's where we began, the environment domain. On this next slide, so here you'll see a red line copy of how the environment domain has been updated. And so that's one takeaway from this training today is that the environment domain has indeed been updated by NIET. Not the whole rubric, just the environment domain. So, my first reminder to you is to make sure that you pull the newest rubric when planning for instruction in 21-22. So, NIET has updated the rubric to strengthen the environment domain and refine its focus on creating a safe and rigorous learning environment. So, you'll see that here. This is just a snapshot of the respectful culture indicator and the proficient scoring level under the respective culture indicator. You'll notice that we didn't dispose of the entire domain, but they made reasonable tweaks that strengthen the domain. So look at that first descriptor where it says teacher. You'll see in black what it was. Teacher student interactions are mostly friendly. Well, they parsed that out a little bit, right, to make sure that it was incredibly clear. They removed the word but may reflect occasional inconsistencies, which might vary in definition based on the evaluator. And they inserted mostly friendly, generally positive, and reflect awareness and consideration of all students' backgrounds and culture. Right. So if you once you get the revised rubric, you'll see that the whole thing has not been chunked, but that it really has been tweaked to this focus on rigorous and inclusive learning environments. So the changes to the domain make more explicit, we believe, to what it looks like for teachers to use responsive and inclusive practices to create a safe and rigorous learning environment. Especially during the pandemic, we realized how essential a learning environment is for students. And then we got some of that from your comments that you shared on our guiding questions. So we're taking this opportunity presented by the revisions made to the rubric to emphasize the importance of an inclusive learning environment. By making language more specific about the environment domain, we hope to, of course, support teachers to build a positive, inclusive classroom, to foster student ownership of behavior and learning, which is big to foster student ownership, right? And to more clearly understand what it looks like to create a classroom where every student is empowered um, to be successful. So we have this one example here. One other change to the rubric that I do want to make sure you take away is that one of the indicator names was updated. Okay, one of the indicator names was updated. The indicator under the environment domain, managing behavior, has been updated to engaging students in managing behavior. Again, with a bent towards being more specific about these responsive and inclusive instructional practices that we really feel will advance student growth. All right, so with that being, having kind of set the groundwork, that the rubric's been revised a bit, it's been revised only in the environment domain, and how and where it's been revised, I want to turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Howard, who's going to walk us a little deeper into what those big buckets are, right, of responsible and inclusive practices. Dr. Howard?
All right, so good morning to those of you who came in after we introduced ourselves. And if you haven't already done so, go ahead and share with us your name and school in the chat. But essentially, the revisions that were made to the environment rubric led us to think more deeply about how we address these practices in our classrooms. So, our office has highlighted four key responsive and inclusive practices that align to the SETS rubric that allow educators to more clearly see what it looks like to provide an environment that addresses each student's strengths and academic needs to design learning experiences that are rigorous, relevant, engaging, and accessible for all students. And those four practices, which you see here on the screen, are creating a safe space for learning, knowing and communicating with students, building relationships, and designing with high expectations for cognitive rigor. These research-based practices link directly to creating an environment that is optimal for learning, which is what we're all aiming to do. So, we want you guys to just think a little bit deeply about applying these responsive and inclusive practices. We see them in our rubric. The research shows us that, hey, these are four key things we need to focus on to make sure we have these really rigorous and responsive learning environments. So we want you to think a little bit about what they look like. We'll see these descriptors on our rubric, and we'll see this handout, which we're going to show you guys in just a little while. But we really want to think about what that looks like if we are having classrooms that display these characteristics. What does that look like and sound like? Also, if I am an evaluator and I'm having a pre-conference or a post-conference with the teacher, what are some questions I could potentially ask that educator to gauge how they are making this work in that classroom? How can I tell if they're having a safe and rigorous classroom environment? What are some questions that I can ask in that pre-conference or in that post-conference? Those are some things we want you to think about. In just a minute, we're going to send you guys into breakout rooms. In your breakout room, you're either going to be focusing on what these descriptors look like or sound like in the classroom, or some questions that you can ask to gauge whether they're actually occurring in the classroom in that pre-conference or in that post-conference. So we're going to split you up into two groups. When you get your breakout room, you'll see that the title of your breakout room will actually tell you which area of focus you're going to have. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to post a link in the chat for a Google Doc. Now, when you get into your rooms, let me go ahead and drop that in the chat, and you guys can go ahead and open this link. Okay. So when you get into your rooms, we're going to need 3 roles amongst the 7 people in your room. One of you will need to be the facilitator to kind of keep the discussion moving forward, either focusing on what that looks like or sounds like when you see these descriptors, or what questions you could ask a teacher to see if they are actually applying these descriptors. So you'll have a facilitator. You will also have a recorder, and that person will actually be typing in your thoughts into the appropriate column of this sheet, which is linked in that Google Doc that I just posted. And then you'll also have a reporter or a spokesperson, and that person will just share with us a couple of the things you guys identified when we come back together as a whole group. So make sure you go ahead and open that document so you can see those descriptors and be able to type into the appropriate columns. Remember, you'll need 3 roles in your breakout rooms: the facilitator, the recorder, and then that spokesperson. Now, are there any questions before I open up these breakout rooms and send you guys off? Any questions? All right, remember, go ahead and open that document. And when you get in, choose your roles. I'm going to give you guys about 10 minutes. So we'll see you guys back here at about 11:24. Those rooms should be opening soon. Is everybody in the room? Looks like it.
I think except the 2 of us,
The 3 of us.
the
Yeah.
3 of us. Are you
Did y'all
gonna
want to go
stay
in the
here?
room?
I thought we were.
Okay, well, let me
Is Faye in
send
the
you.
room? I don't see Faye.
Faye's here.
I'm here. Yeah.
Y'all want to go to a room?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think we can be at
Okay.
2 different rooms. Yeah.
Okay.
And you're staying, I think.
Yes. Kim needs to stay in case somebody gets kicked out.
Okay.
Mhm.
And it may or may not allow you. Sometimes it has issues after it's open that it won't allow you to add.
Oh, okay.
But it looks like it's working. Yeah. All right.
Hi, Jennifer. Are you just joining or were you already in the room and got kicked out?
I was somewhere and now I'm back to you.
Okay. All right. I'm going to try and send you back to the room because they're still in there for a few more minutes. All right, so welcome back. I'm certain that you guys engaged in some really fruitful conversation surrounding these inclusive and responsive practices. And you selected a spokesperson. So if I could hear from those who talked about looks like and sounds like, when we think about a safe space for learning, what does that look like or sound like? So what are some examples you guys had? If you could share about two, maybe. My spokesperson for my looks like, sounds like group.
I'll be honest, I didn't know that we had, I may have gotten it incorrect. We did talk about that. I didn't know we were assigned to just talk about that because we talked about a lot of things.
Okay.
But our group spoke a lot about, we focused on what it's going to be at the beginning of the year so that we could focus on what we're about to walk into, because we've got a range of people. TAs were in our group. We've got guidance counselors, principals. So there were a lot of different people. So we talked about it from different perspectives. We talked about, of course, the rubric says we want current student work. So that almost means that you need to have some blank spaces on your walls so that students know that they'll be able to add to it. If your walls are covered in prepackaged teacher pay teacher or posters, they don't realize that it's their space. Desk formation was a big thing. If you're talking about how our desks are going to be formed, are you going to be setting it up like a prison guard where you can walk back and forth? And is your desk arranged that it's a place where you sit behind it? Or is it set up like it's a workspace for you and your students? Of course, we want to have the objectives and targets, especially as you're, well, for every grade, but we were looking at it through the lens of an older child. They want to know what they're going to learn in their class. So that needs to be posted up there. I think that's true all the way down to kindergarten, but those older students really want to know that early in the year. And then we spoke about teacher involvement and just having that presence in your room. That starts at meet the teacher. You're not just sitting there at the door greeting people. You're walking around schmoozing, getting to know everyone.
Awesome. So I'm really hearing things that will show how students are welcome in that classroom, just really making sure that they know that their work is relevant. Like you said, that blank space is there for them, that they are an important part of that classroom, making sure that those desks are set up in kind of a welcoming manner where you're not the dictator of that classroom, but it's certainly a classroom community. So several things I hear there, really making sure that for those older learners, we know that older learners want to learn things that they deem are important. So making sure that they understand what it is they're there for, understanding those objectives of that lesson, really making sure, again, that that is a safe space for them to learn, where they feel comfortable learning. What about someone from the conference questions? Who are your spokesperson? Who is your spokesperson? What are some conference questions you can ask to gauge whether an educator is creating a safe space for learning?
I'll go ahead and talk about what our group said. I think if we're talking about making sure that the teachers are all on the same page, that we kind of ask from them why, just to get buy-in, to kind of figure out why they feel it's important to have student work displayed. We also discussed the different strategies for that, but one of the things that somebody had mentioned in our group, and my computer was kind of cutting in and out, so I think it was Jennifer that had mentioned that it continues on in all of the things that you are doing to make sure that the students are feeling safe and included, and giving the example from a previous training about possibly giving a survey at the beginning of the year just to kind of set the tone for the year, being very inclusive, asking about, what pronouns students prefer to be used to identify, and making sure that you get teacher involvement in that. So that was kind of one of the big things that we talked about.
Awesome. So I'm hearing things like, first of all, really knowing your students so that you know an environment that makes them comfortable. We know that the pronoun discussion is something that's very heavy in today's society. We really need to know our students and make sure that we are approaching them in the correct manner, right? So that that is a good space for them. That classroom is a space for them to learn. In those conferences, asking those questions to the teacher about why they feel like it's necessary to have that kind of safe learning space. What are you doing to make sure that this space is safe for learning for every educator in that classroom? Those are some things that are really important. So what our office did was create a document centered around those 4 responsive and inclusive practices, and I'm going to post that in the chat for you. And it really will just link you to a table that we completed with all 4 of those responsive and inclusive practices. So that is here for you. And we just kind of completed it with several things that we expect to see or hear in a classroom where it's safe for students, where learning is rigorous, where all students are included, and then some conference questions that could be asked. So that's just a document that would support you in making sure that this environment rubric is central to what educators are doing in classrooms every day. So be sure to click on that link. Check out those practices and use them to help you make sure that these strategies are being applied.
And Dr. Howard, just as a point of clarification we made in our group, the conferences that we're referencing are the pre and post conferences associated with the POP cycle, with the SCTS POP cycle.
Thank you, Dr. Hartwell. All right, so in June, the state board approved making that simplified SLO that you all saw last year a permanent fixture. So I'm just going to take a few moments to walk through how that simplified SLO really aligns with our focus on the environment. The population and baseline section was shifted from basically a recitation of the demographics of your focus class to 2 simple questions. What do you already know, and what do you know about the support different students will need? So really focusing on those individual students. You'll see that the learning objective section encourages teachers to narrow down to 1 high priority standard, and the evidence the teacher will collect versus just relying on a broad set of standardized assessments, really focusing on that group of students. You see that the vision is that the work of writing and reflecting on the SLO would be streamlined and for many teachers would fit into existing school data team structures or PLCs and not feeling like teachers have to fit something into their classroom that doesn't already fit, really focusing on what the teacher's already doing with the students in that classroom. Now, in the instructional strategies section, which you see here, we've added a reflective question in section 3 that asks teachers to consider which inclusive learning practice is most closely connected to their work. So those practices that are linked in that document that I just shared, teachers are going to incorporate that into their SLO. Which of those do they see being most closely linked to what they're doing with their students? And this certainly aligns with those changes to the environment domain that they'll see in that rubric this year and that we're discussing here today. All right, so I am now going to turn it over to Faye, and Faye is going to take us a little bit deeper into visualizing these practices in the classroom.
Thanks so much, Dr. Howard, for walking us through the responsive and inclusive learning strategies, and also how that connects to our simplified SLO. Thanks to everyone, too, for their active participation in their groups as they thought and discussed what those look like and sound like, as well as appropriate post or pre-conference questions to ask aligned to those. So on the next slide, as we identify our educators' needs, our participants' needs, we truly want them to start with this reflection. Consider your school and these 4 bullets: creating a safe space for learning, knowing and communicating with students, building relationships, and designing with high expectations for cognitive rigor, which we identified earlier as the responsive and inclusive learning practices that are research-based. So which among these do you consider as the greatest challenge when working with students? Now, that's too long to type. So if you are referring to bullet 1, just type 1. If you are referring to bullet 2, go ahead and type 2. If you're referring to 3, type 3. And then for the last bullet, type 4. And you may have multiple bullets that you believe may be a challenge. So if you would type that in the chat box, please. Or maybe if it's not for you, maybe for other educators, which could be a challenge for them, because it looks like we have very awesome educators in here. Where could it be that others may have a challenge when working with students? And I am just waiting for responses, and I'm just gonna try to minimize and see if I can reduce our background noise. Okay, thank you. All right, see some responses. We have fours and threes. It looks like mostly fours, which is designing with high expectations for cognitive rigor. And then we have some threes, building relationships, and then we have no response for that one. It looks like in Dorchester they've kind of established that, and then one person also responded knowing and communicating with students. So sometimes it may be a challenge when we don't see these practices in action, although you all did a lot of visualization and connecting to your own experiences earlier. But on the next slide, we'll try to just have a glimpse of a classroom who is Laura from New Orleans. Her class was what we're going to show are two clips from her fourth grade class, which was actually during the time that Katrina hit. So we're pulling from her lesson because these two short clips model these practices. And what we hope to do is that we'll show you these clips. And as you're looking, I want you to be thinking about how did the teacher model inclusive and responsive practices. I'm giving you a background that because of the hurricane, her class was actually composed of students from other schools and then combined into hers. So we believe that she shows great modeling of how she made her classroom reflect all these four responsive and inclusive strategies. So let me shift the screen to mine. And I'll pause in between two videos so that you can digest it a little bit before we debrief. So just be mindful of this. That is your question. How did the teacher model inclusive and responsive practices?
All right. Well, we already elected our person. Now, that kind of leads us into our lesson today. Okay? Our goal today, by the end of this lesson, is we want to be able to evaluate situations from different perspectives or point of views. And believe it or not, we actually did that a little bit in our hook. We looked at a situation and we looked at it from different point of views. And then we also want to identify how others may feel in a given situation or scenario. Did we just do that? Yeah. We didn't have just one point of view. We had how many? Four. We had 4 point of views. So yeah, we were looking at how others may feel. And then also we're going to apply looking at different perspectives to our daily life. And this kind of went with our heart-to-heart that we had last week and why it's important to think of the other person before you say something. Okay? All right. So today for our GLE, it's make simple inferences from the point of view of another character. So I'm going to give you some letters from Dear Mrs. LaRue, our story this week, and you're going to use clues from the story and what is in your schema, things that you already know, and you're going to come up with how another character may feel. Because we know how Ike, the main character, feels, don't we? He puts it on paper. He lets us know how he's feeling. What you're going to do today is you're going to look at Ike's letter and you're going to respond to him, but from a different character's point of view. All right? We're also going to organize our thoughts and ideas from different points of views to persuade our audience. We're going to start with a 4-square today to brainstorm our ideas, and then tomorrow we're going to put it into proper, friendly letter format. Are there any questions? We're good? Okay, well, let's roll. I do. I'm going to model for you what I expect of you. Okay, we're going to do some group work in just a few minutes, but I need to model for you first. Okay, and guess what? We're working in groups, so guess what you get to do? Talk. Okay, we're going to help each other out here. You're going to talk amongst your groups, And you're going to talk about how might the neighbors, some of you might have the guards, how might the guards respond to Ike, okay? One group even has Mrs. Klondike, and she looks so sweet, but he makes her out to be so mean, all right? So you're going to respond. You get to put your name tag on, read, think about how this person might answer. You guys can even change your voices if you want. How's that sound? I know how some of you like acting. You can even change your voice if you want. And then I even have jobs for you. So on your index card, when I give you your number, I want you just to write it on your index card. Now this index card we're also going to use as our exit ticket at the end, and it's also going to be our reminder throughout our lesson because each person is going to have a certain job. 1, write it. 2, 3, 4. So Kendrick, when I say the magic word, you can go to your group and work with them. Are there any questions before we start, kiddos? What? All right. We're ready to roll? All right, I'm going to set my timer. I'm going to give you about maybe 10 minutes. Yeah, I'll give you 10 minutes. All right, to go ahead and brainstorm this. If you finish early, I want you guys to practice how that person might say the comment, because guess what we're going to do? We're going to come back together as a group, and you guys get to share what you all wrote. Okay, so you guys can kind of rehearse it together as a group. You ready, Kendrick? All right, cheeseburger, cheeseburger. Go ahead and begin, guys.
All right, so that was the first clip. We're now going to move on to the next clip. Again, what you want to think about as you're watching is how did the teacher model inclusive and responsive practices? Or how does the teacher model?
Okay. So who's person number 1? Okay, so you're person number 1. And what is your job right now? What's your role?
Like the ingredients and the first comment.
Okay. Have you guys read the letter yet?
Yes.
Oh, you already read it. Okay, good. Good. All right, so you're going to read your comment to the group? What comment number? What is the first comment?
Right here, I started in his fall, so he started to limp.
So you're Dr. Wilfrey. What would Dr. Wilfrey say about Ike limping like that? Well, first Ike said you think he's a faker? Why?
Because on the rest of the letter said I felt queasy, so I barely ate dinner except for the yellow gravy. Because he probably ate all the stuff that was good, but the stuff that was nasty he didn't eat.
Have you ever done that? I've done that before too. I used to do that when I was younger. Okay. So you think he's faking? Do any of you guys? Do you think he's faking, Caleb? You think Ike's really sick? I love the vocabulary. Doing that inventive spelling too.
UNC. BECAUNC. No, erase that. That's how you spell the pen.
Okay. No. Hold on. We need our rules. Who's person 1? Then she needs to be writing. And you can help her out.
All right, I will unshare and request Dr. Howard to project our slide on what you were reflecting on and trying to make connections with to the video on those inclusive and responsive practices and which one did the teacher model and how. Oh, I already see Jennifer typing in the chat. Hopefully she has that answer. Jennifer wrote something here, and I encourage everybody else to drop something in the chat, and then I'll ask for non-volunteers to expound on their answers. I'm going to give you the wait time. This is virtual learning, and just like in the physical classroom, we want to give you wait time as you respond. If you could just make a connection or two to any of these that you saw the teacher model. And there are 17 of us in the room, I believe, so I should see lots of answers. And if you could label them to the specific practice, these actions that you've identified, that would also be wonderful. I'll give you guys another minute to type in the chat, and then I'll call for non-volunteers. As we know, the rubric wants us to engage participants voluntarily, and also those who are non-volunteers. All right, that was another minute that had just passed. And so it feels like it's a longer time when you're on virtual space, but I see some responses and I'm going to start to just call on some friends. And I see that Dahlia, you wrote on here asking for personal experience so students can relate. So among these 4 practices, which one would you connect that to, if you would?
I would think maybe 2 and 3.
Yes, definitely when we have a piece of evidence, right? Teacher behavior, it can land in multiple places. That kind of reinforces what the rubric also is. It's holistic. And we said these responsive and inclusive practices are helping us strengthen the environment domain, which is in our SCTS 4.0 rubric. So that makes perfect sense. I do agree with that. Dahlia, thank you for hopping on the mic. And I know that in the very beginning, we have Jennifer that shared a lot with us. If you could break down some of these responses that these examples that you pulled from those 2 clips, could you please just help us tie them to any of those 4 inclusive and responsive practices so that we could all be more specific? Because sometimes it's the labeling. Some educators don't think they're doing it. Somebody has to label these practices for them to know, oh, I'm already doing these things. This is just good teaching, right? So Jennifer, please hop on the mic.
Yes, ma'am. Well, I thought that I was really impressed by the way that when she went to the group who seemed to be struggling a little bit, she knelt down and got on their level. She did not seem to be in a rush to hurry along. She took the time to ask the probing questions. She apparently already knew where their misconceptions would lie, but she didn't just rush to tell them what they should think. She took the time to ask them and truly hear what they had to say. I like that she laughed with them. In a later group that she was with the little boys and a girl, one of the little boys just jumped to do something and she redirected him responsively, saying, wait, that's not your role. Let's let this go to the person who was assigned this role. So I thought overall she did an excellent job knowing and communicating her students, and just the way she conducted herself shows that she cares about building those relationships with them. She did a great job when she was setting up the lesson with designing the high expectations for their rigor. And I love that she did the I do so that there was no misinterpreting, hey, what is it that I should be doing? They actually got to see it and hear her explain it. So I thought she did a great job with that.
Thanks so much, Jennifer. And absolutely, you hit on labeling those actions that she did in the classroom. So I see some responses here. Patrick had put in, he had labeled where that designing with high expectations for cognitive rigor is, and so have the others. So I know earlier on when we did a quick check, like a pulse check, where do you think you, or possibly not you, but other educators in your district may struggle with and have and may need additional support, then we thought that that is where they may land. But in a simple clip like these two, we could see that these things can happen, including that designing with high expectations for cognitive rigor as a practice. So without dragging this portion any longer, we're going to move on to the next slide. Again, I so appreciate your participation. We're almost about to wrap up. We promise to not be over time. I just want you to think on your next steps. So, as a final reflection, what next step can you take to incorporate responsive and inclusive strategies? Now, it sounds like many of you are already doing this. So, if you're thinking about other educators, what could be a next step that they could take on, or what could be your next step to help them incorporate responsive and inclusive strategies? And again, I'll give you about 2 minutes to respond in the chat box, and then I'll ask for somebody to hop on the mic. So we have to tweak this question a little bit since y'all seem like you have been doing these practices. But what if somebody needs help? How could we help them get to the next step of incorporating these practices? So please continue typing in the chat. These are different things that each and every one of us can take away with from this session. And I just want to make a request from, let's see, Abigail. Will you please just expound a little bit more on what your response is in the chat box so we can hear your voice?
I know my response was a very school counselor response, but I really think that if you can build a relationship with your students, you'll get to know them better and know how they learn, and how to actually make your classroom, inclusive, and how you can be more responsive to their needs academically, but also, give some support in all other realms. So I think you can do that from day one, and then, you'll be more successful in how you cater your classroom almost to your students.
So Abigail, thank you for joining us. Your role as a school counselor is definitely very important. Just like what you did today, you reminded us that this step of relationship building, especially that the new academic year is just about to start, is something that's very important as a foundation to creating a great classroom environment that hits all those responsive and inclusive practices. So thank you for that. So without further ado, I am going to move on to the next slide, but I would like to acknowledge your responses in here. I truly appreciate you sharing. Keep on typing in. I see that others are talking about group assignments. Don't just assign them, make sure you enforce them. So I think many of us may miss that sometimes, and make sure that other students are not stepping over other students' roles that have been assigned, which makes this space for learning really, really safe for everyone when those roles are clear. So thank you. On this slide, you will see our a screenshot of our effectiveness website. And if Dr. Howard clicks again, I think it will also have a circle around expanded ATEP teacher resources. And so here are 3 things we would like to point to you. I'm glad, again, we have a school counselor here. You may have heard that we have revised the evaluation model for special areas, which covers the school counselors, school librarians, and speech language professionals. So when you go to our website, you'll be able to locate it there, where it's on the leftmost column, second row. And then we also have resources for PADEP, since PADEP is under the effectiveness side of our office. That's for the principal evaluation. And then for the majority, you'll find resources under the expanded ADEPT teacher evaluations. And I'm just going to take you briefly to our website so that you don't have to memorize these links or try to track them. I'll just briefly show it to you. All right, so as long as you could get to ed.sc.gov, hover over educators, and then it will have a drop-down menu. Click on educator effectiveness, and then you will see the resources here for teacher evaluation resources. The responsive and inclusive practices document is here, as well as the rubric with the updated environment domain. And I also want to point out that SLO resource is here under supporting student growth. Dr. Howard did discuss about the simplified SLO. All the resources are here. I'm now asking Dr. Howard and Dr. Hartwell to say some parting words.
I'll just end by saying thank you all for your participation today. Hopefully, in your conversation and in our direction to you, you've been able to learn a little bit more about some things we have upcoming this year with the environment rubric. Feel free to reach out to us if there's anything we can do to support you moving forward. We're happy, and that's why we're here.
I want to thank my colleagues for being a part of this training, and thank all of you for coming. This is such a wonderful turnout. We didn't know how many to expect, but each of you has made this training so much more valuable. So we just appreciate you. Dr. Howard is displaying our contact information if you ever need to get in touch with us. We wish you well and lots of success for the upcoming school year. And thanks to each of you for joining us for this professional development session. Thank you so much. We'll stick around for a little while in case anyone wants to drop questions in the chat box. Have a good day, everybody.
I am stopping the recording.